Hi there, my name is Nancy McKay, and this is Women and Alcohol. Today, my very special guest is Donna Mazzitelli. Donna is an author, writing coach, editor, and publisher. And in addition to being a two-time cancer survivor, Donna is joyfully living a life of recovery, having quit drinking just about 28 years ago on February 20th, 1993. So we're going to be talking to Donna today about recovery, cancer, and Donna's new book, Mosaic Heart, Pieces of an Unfinished Life. Welcome, Donna.
Thanks, Nancy. It's nice to be here with you.
Great for me to have you here. I'm just delighted. So
thank you. Well, and I'm excited to be here too. So
what tell us a little bit about this new book coming out. And when is it going to be released?
Yes, that's the big mystery question. So Valentine's Day is a significant date in my story. And so initially it was going to be out on Valentine's Day. And I can say it's been going to be out on Valentine's Day over, multiple years. So this book has been a loving work in progress for over a decade now. It's been a long time coming. So now I am looking at, and I really do think this is it. It will be coming out by fall of this year of 2021.
Oh, that's great.
So, and I'm excited for that for a couple of reasons. It's like with COVID, I really want to have an event in person. And so by summer to fall, we should be in a place where we are able to be at gatherings together. And so that's part of it. It's like there's selfish reasons there. I really want an event where I can be with people live and in person and not have to do it on social media. So not do it on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's one reason I'm really excited. And of course, the second was because of COVID, the fact that we should all be in a place where we can be together. And, that we will have reached a level of immunity that we can, not be so afraid of gathering together. So,
right.
So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. So it feels like, I tell authors all the time that there's always a right timing for a book, and books take on a life of their own, and they let us know when they're meant to be born into the world. And so my book has definitely been telling me for a long time that it wasn't time yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
but it's coming. I'm in editing, so I'm actually in the midst of rewrites. I'm almost done. To honor Valentine's Day, I've made a commitment to my editor that I will have the book back to him on Valentine's Day so that he can start the second level of editing. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
It's exciting. It's really exciting.
This editing process, is it lengthy? Or is it?
It is. I mean, it's the same process that I put books through when I'm the editor. So we go through a developmental edit and then a line edit, and then we go into proofreading. So it goes back and forth 3 times.
Okay.
And because of memoir, which is what I always tell authors who are working on memoir, or even personal growth where they're telling part of their story, sometimes you have to really let time pass and just really sit with things so that whatever needs to come out has a chance to come out. And if you have to go back and revisit parts of your story and sit with it in order to bring it out, you have to allow for that. So it needs time to just percolate, and sometimes we have more healing to do. And so the writing gives us an opportunity, and the editing gives us an opportunity to revisit things and see what else is left to kind of work through. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well,
so it's a process.
I was going to ask you about that because about the healing process. I've heard from so many people and authors specifically that it's hard to tell your story if you haven't healed from it, because if you're still in the muck,
right,
it can really be painful, right?
Yes, so absolutely.
What are your thoughts there?
So no, I think that there has to be a certain level of healing. I mean, does it have to be where we are completely healed? I don't think that's true, because in the process of writing and rewriting, more healing does take place. I mean, I can say that as I go back through it, I'm experiencing that there's more healing that's taking place. There's more, there's emotions that come up at times that, wow, it's still sad to think about those times. Or then there's emotions that come up of, wow, I'm so grateful for that moment that I went through. For the people that were there. So all of these different emotions, come back up, but at least I can look at it from a place of, I can re-experience it to a degree, but also there's introspection as part of it. So it is a different place. And when I'm wearing my editor hat with a client, I mean, the one thing that I am very aware of is that sometimes when people are still in the muck, like you said, then sometimes as the editor, I need to point that out in as gentle a way as possible to give them the opportunity to maybe, that this is still something that is still really fresh and needs to be like looked at a bit. And maybe it's not time to write about this piece because it is still there's just still too much of an open wound here.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
So I feel like that's part of my job to help people see that if they can't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
Well,
let's talk about the parts that your memoir covers, and tell us a little bit about that.
So when I started writing my memoir, I thought it was going to be everything. I thought it was going to include my recovery, my alcoholic story, my recovery story, my cancer story, my motherhood, parts of my life. It's like, I thought it was going to be everything. Yeah. And it just turned out it was too much. So I finally had to break the book into 2 pieces. So this memoir is about my 2 experiences with cancer. And actually it's the transformation that I went through and the learning that I went through, and just how I came to see cancer, and also how I came to see treatment. So I really do think there's a lot of dimensions to it. And interwoven is that through my first experience with cancer, my husband and I really kept him out of it a lot. My first time with my first experience of cancer, I really kept everybody out. I wanted to figure it out on my own, and I was trying to find an alternative way to approach it. And we actually, afterwards, I mean, it was a few years later, or more than at least about 4 years later, that we actually separated for a year and a half. And so by the time I had a second cancer, we had come back together. So all of that's woven in. So it's I look at it that it's quite beautiful in the sense of the way, the universe, kind of what was presented to me, the opportunities, and kind of what I came to know, and the healing that took place, not only with cancer, but my marriage, our relationship, how we went through my second cancer experience together, and how much of a support he was. I mean, it was, I get chills even just talking about it, because it was a powerful experience.
Yeah.
So I hope that comes through in my story. I hope that.
Well, I'm sure it does, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I just can't.
Thank you. Thank you.
And tell us the significance of Valentine's Day.
Well, I was diagnosed both times on Valentine's Day. So that was profound. I mean, the first time was a phone call from the radiologist telling me that I did have cancer, and that was breast cancer. And the second time was a visit to a colorectal surgeon, thinking that I had hemorrhoids, and having him tell me that he knew it was cancer. Oh. So both of those happened on Valentine's Day. So I will never have a medical appointment on Valentine's Day again. I can tell you that. So not if I have a choice in it.
Well, I can relate, because I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer on my birthday 6 years ago, and that was yesterday. So
I saw that, and happy birthday. I did see that. That had to be.
So when I made the appointment for surgery, they said, well, you can do February 2nd. And I said, kind of, I didn't want to say, well, it's my birthday, but I kind of went, And she said, well, or February 4th. And I said, well, that's my husband's birthday. So I'll take one for the team.
Oh my gosh. That's, oh, wow.
It's my birthday. But, it is interesting how those things, like one Valentine's Day would be one thing, but having two diagnoses come through on the same day, and how many years apart was that?
Seven years apart. Yeah. And actually, and this year is 7 years since that second diagnosis. Yeah.
Lucky 7. Yeah. Well, steer clear of the doctor's office this year.
I will. I will. Oh.
God. So, what else? Let's talk about recovery a little bit.
Sure.
So, you're coming up on 28 years. Does it even feel like you ever drank?
It's crazy. You're right. I mean, it's like I have to really draw on memories that go way back to remember. It's true. I mean, when I remember in the beginning, I mean, I did get sober in the rooms of AA. That's where I found a solution, and initially. And there were many times I went to meetings where the format was that you tell your story. They'd have a speaker and you tell your story. And so I went, often to those. And I've thought about it that if today, which I'm not in the rooms of AA anymore, I choose to do my recovery different. But if I were asked to share my story, it would be a challenge, almost, honestly, in some ways, to go back through a drunk-a-log at this point. I mean, I can bring it back, but it's just not in the forefront of my mind the way it was 28, to 25 years ago, for sure.
Right.
So it's very different. Yeah. So as the years go on.
Have you had any feelings, like in the last 10 years of, boy, a drink really sounds like a good idea, or have any sort of anything come up where you think that just seems like a good idea?
Not in that. I can say that in the last 10 years, because I've been through some really hard stuff in the last 10 years with our family. And so there's definitely been things, along with my own cancer, 7 years ago, as I said.
Right.
There have been times that I have said, I wish I drank. I wish I drank, because, boy, that would be a way to just shut this all off. Yeah. But not, it isn't my go-to, first thought. Not at all.
Right.
But there have been times that it's more of and I don't even think the phrase is, I wish I drank. It's more like, well, it would be nice if I drank, maybe, to, as a way to like medicate this, to deal with whatever's going on. But never have I said, boy, I want to grab a drink. No, I haven't felt like that. I mean, I feel very fortunate in that regard, that's never been, it's not been something that I've really had to continue to try and keep in check, in a sense, that went away. That compulsion or that obsession went away early in my recovery, really. Yeah. So I feel very fortunate for that. Yeah.
Well,
grateful.
And it did for me too. And I, relapse is not part of my story either. And, I've only had, one really strong time where I was this close, and that was 8 years in. So that took me by surprise, because I had been to a meeting that morning, and, I felt like I was, on it.
Wow.
And so it came out of the blue and hit me right across the face.
Yeah.
And it really surprised me. So
I bet.
And I know everybody is different. And since that came at me at 8 years, it's like, well, what's to prevent that from happening at 15 years or, whatever.
Sure.
And I'm coming up on 12 years, and
That's awesome.
It's so interesting because in the last, I don't know how long it's been, but and I feel like I am still pretty on top of my, kind of on top of my game, because that's how I've built my business around, I work with women who are concerned about their drinking. That's one of the things that we really work on. And so, it's very much top of mind for me. And I really do so much work on myself that I feel like I'm in a good place. I don't take part in 12-step meetings any longer, but that is part of my foundation. And
yes.
And the tools are still there for me. I mean, I still use them. So the thing that I think is interesting, though, is that I've had a lot of, for lack of a better term, drunk dreams, where in my dream, I'm drinking, and then I go to a meeting. And sometimes I admit that I have been drinking, and sometimes I don't. And
interesting.
And it's so odd. It's very odd. And the most recent one that I had was just last week, or last week. Somebody had turned me on to the I think it's on HBO, The Flight Attendant.
Okay, haven't seen it.
This new series, and the star of the show is this alcoholic flight attendant who, drinks an exorbitant amount of alcohol and doesn't really seem to be too drunk, but so it's not terribly realistic, but she does black out, and she, does things that she doesn't remember doing. And that I've made a decision that I don't want to watch that anymore, because it doesn't make me thirsty, but it makes it very top of mind.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's like, I don't need to go there.
Right.
I don't need to put myself in that position to where I'm either yelling at the screen saying, "You stupid bitch," what the hell are you doing? Or thinking that, well, gee, that looks like a good idea. They're having fun. Why can't I do that? So it's not a good idea.
No. Doesn't sound, no, not at all.
And you hear so much about people relapsing after 10 years or 15 years, or, when I first got sober, I met a woman who relapsed after 21 years, I think. And it was like, it scared the shit out of me.
Yep. I've heard those too. I've heard. Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, you need to stay spiritually fit.
Exactly.
And know that, ask for help in any form. I talk to God all the time, and I use a God box, and I do all kinds of stuff,
right.
Make sure that I'm on top of it.
Yeah.
And, drinking is the last thing that I want to do right now. And, I had my cancer diagnosis after I got sober too, and it never occurred to me to drink. Never.
No. Right. No, me neither. No, not at all. I mean, thinking about drunk dreams or drinking dreams, I haven't had one of those in years, but I remember I've had them, and I know I've had them, I know I've had at least one in more recent years, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But they were, in mine, it was always that I would wake up, I would be going, oh my God, what have I done? And then I'd wake up. That would be the moment I would wake up. And I would, in my dream, go, oh my God, what I've done, and what have I done? And also that I have to start over counting from the beginning. I mean, that was, I always heard that as well too, which, yeah, which is kind of funny. I mean, the irony of that is that we are all one, it's one day at a time, no matter what. It doesn't matter. I mean, and the people that you hear about that do end up, relapsing after 20 plus years, and I've heard those stories too, it, just shows you that it is one day at a time. And so for me, I think the biggest thing is, it's to never forget where I've come from.
Exactly.
Never. It isn't the first thing I tell people about myself, and I don't even necessarily tell people. There was a period of time I really wasn't telling people about it at all. Mm-hmm. I now do talk about it more. I mean, I because I don't know, as I get more reflective on my life, it's like this is a part of my story. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so I don't want to ever forget. So I remember, but yet I know that I'm not every day trying to make it. I'm not white knuckling through a day. I'm not, trying to make it through. I'm not in a dry drunk or any of those things.
Right.
So I know I'm in a very different place. And that is, I do think, because I do have a very strong spiritual life as well. I mean, that's a really important part of my life. And I have a very strong sense of, I'm introspective. I'm always looking at how can I become a better person? What is the opportunity here? What is there that I can learn from this? I can see that, I've replaced that addiction with other types of addiction in the sense of, I focus on my family a lot. I obsess about my children. I can go there. And so I know that that's a part of, I have to keep that in check too, that, I can't, my children are grown now and my daughters are grown. I can't carry them through their lives. I can still be a support, but I sure can't caretake them and carry them through. Right. So I feel like that's something I have to keep that more in check than ever thinking about picking up a drink at this point, to be honest. That's a bigger one.
Yeah. It's interesting. And when you talk about remembering, but not, being there all the time, that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about is, you need to remember what it was like.
Yes.
But at the same time, you don't need to beat yourself up for it, and you don't need to live there as far as, I'm nothing but an alcoholic, and that sort of thing. I'm kind of on the fence on the label thing. I'm not sure. I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a disease that's got you, but I am so passionate about smashing the stigma that's involved that, and I think having conversations like this, and I know that the sober curious movement and gray area drinking is getting so much more attention now than it has in the past. And so more people are looking at recovery as an option and not as a punishment, but as a way to live their life more fully.
Exactly.
And so, and I know a lot of people who are, they are really against the labels, and, I'm not quite sure where I stand on it. I just don't want the label to be stigmatizing.
Right.
So,
and I think that it's something that each person, we have to decide for ourselves. It isn't, I can't attach that to someone else. I have no right to do that.
Right. Absolutely.
I can decide to attach it to myself if I want to. I mean, if I do refer to myself as an alcoholic, I refer to myself as a recovered alcoholic. Now, that's contrary to 12-step. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like I really do feel like I'm recovered. I have recovered. It is not something, it, as I said before, it's something that I will never forget as a part of my story. But at the same time, it is not the all of me, and it's not the most of me. It's a piece. It's one of the pieces of me. So I had a therapist when I first got sober, and I attached that label, and I'm in 12 step and I'm attaching that label, and I would talk about myself as an alcoholic. And I remember her saying to me, she cautioned me about attaching that label to myself. Actually, not saying you shouldn't. It wasn't from a place of that, but to remember that you are so much more. That's a part of you, Donna. That's not all of you. So if you can keep it, because for a while it became all of me. I was all consumed with being an alcoholic and being being a recovering alcoholic. Yeah. And so her caution was to try to keep that in check as well, to keep it, right, from that, almost like an obsession about that's all there is to me.
Right. Taking over your identity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that you're so much more than that. So just remember that. So I it took me a long time to really, I appreciated it at the time, but I've come to appreciate it even more.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about recovery from anything, right?
Yes. Right.
As time goes on, we go through different phases and thoughts about it. Right. It changes over time. And yes. So I think that's really critical for people to understand, is that, we may think of it in one way,
right,
at first, and then our feelings may transition. And, as we grow in our sobriety and our recovery, then things don't, they take on a different perspective.
Exactly.
You have a totally different perspective than I do, because you've got, 12 more years or 15 more years on me than I do as far as sobriety goes. I think we're probably about the same age, but you got sober a lot earlier than I did. So, I just think it's.
Well, and I think I will say this, that I think there's people that are in like 12 step who might have as many years or even more years, who still look at it a certain way, in a different way than I do. So I think every person has to, again, it comes back to that this has to be so individual to figure out what's going to help keep me healthy, what's going to help keep me as clear-minded as possible, what's going to help keep me as open to life and to living and to having joy in my life. And so I think that there's just, it's not one, there's not one prescription to follow for everybody. I mean, right. I think that's kind of to your point of speaking about some of the movements that are happening now. More and more we're seeing that, is that there's got to be other ways to do this. There's got to be other ways to decide that substances aren't supporting me in my life. And yet I can do that without having to put a label on myself, or without having to take part in a certain type of program. So I love that people are getting more exploratory about that, and trying to find other ways to do it, so that, because I think if we get stuck with there's only one way to do this, then I think that has a lot to do with why the percentages of relapse are so high.
Yeah.
Because we've got to have as many different ways to go about it as there are people and personalities.
Right. I agree.
So.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Donna, I've been putting your website.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you for doing that. Uh-huh.
And I'm going to put your email up, and there's your email.
Wonderful.
And, what else would you like for people to know about you, and how what are the ways that people can work with you?
So, well, as you've shared the things that I've been through, I think I would say the most important thing that has happened to me as a human being is that I've become a more compassionate person, just because of what I've lived through myself. And it's made me more compassionate, more able to be a companion to people who are going through things. So when I work with somebody on a book, for instance, when I'm working with someone on their memoir, or even somebody who wants to write personal growth and development book and really wants to keep themselves out of it, and I'll encourage them to bring themselves into it. It's like I can do that and walk with people. I can be with people in the pain of their lives, and I can be with people in the recovery in their lives. I can be with people, when they get into the light, so I have that ability to companion people. And I'm just, I think that's part of the gift I bring, is that it's, I don't usually work with, sometimes people will say, I don't want to be judged, or, something along those lines. And it's like, that's not, I really don't think that's where I operate. I mean, I can definitely get judgy just like anybody else, but I really don't approach, working with people in that way. It's like, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? And what can I do to support you so that you can tell your story?
Yeah.
So that's, I think that's what I'd love people to know about me, is that's just, I called myself the wordsmith when I first started working, because, an editor is a wordsmith.
Mm-hmm.
But I finally came to realize that what I do, and I came up with this name for myself, that I call myself the word heartiste, because I really do work with my heart. And I bring my heart, my compassion, and my intuition into working with somebody. And I think that's partly because life has worked on me. And so then I can work with people in their lives.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to turn everything that I've been through into something that can be of service to others. And that's what I hope my book does. And when I do my second memoir that will be about my, alcoholism, addiction, motherhood. It's like, I just hope that will serve people as well. That it's not just about me telling my story because I want to tell my story, but it's like, I really hope that it offers some inspiration and just some understanding that no one is alone. None of us are alone.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, your
So thank
story,
you.
And I've heard more of your story in other venues, and your story will help people, and it's just so. Your writing is so incredible, and I can't wait to read the whole thing.
Thanks,
And
Nancy.
if I ever attempt to write my memoir, I will definitely have it in your very capable, loving hands.
Thank you. Well, I'd be honored to work with you on it. So I realize we have some parallels in our lives. And so that's the other piece, is that it would be an honor to work with you on it, if you decide that that's something you want to do someday.
Yeah. Well, I did the one chapter in the Ready to Fly series, and I never anticipated doing that, and it was so it was really cool to write that. And so it is definitely something that I want to do. I just am not quite sure what the timeline will be for that. So
well, exactly, but I'm sure it was a cathartic experience to some degree, probably.
Very cathartic.
Yeah.
Well, Donna,
thank you.
Really appreciate you being with me today, and I appreciate your time,
Nancy,
and your vulnerability and sharing your story. And I really hope that folks will reach out to you, and that you'll hear from our viewers. And
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And ladies, I want to invite you to join my Facebook group, Women and Alcohol. Donna joins us there, and we just chat when something comes up for people, and we just share and support one another, and we'd love to have you. So consider that. And I think that's a wrap.
Thanks, Nancy. This was wonderful. This was fun.
It was fun.
Thank you.
All right.